Hey everyone, Sarah here. Rewind Justice brings you revenge stories that will blow your mind. If you're ready, hit subscribe and let's go.
My name is Simona Chaby and I'm 29 years old. I want to start with a number. Not a dramatic number. Not a number that will make you gasp. Just a number that, once I explain it, will tell you everything you need to know about who I am and what I was trying to do. 112. That is how many Friday mornings I set an alarm for 7 a.m. Not because I had to be anywhere but because I had decided that 7 a.m. on Fridays was when I transferred money. Before coffee. Before checking my phone. Before I could talk myself out of it or find a reason the transfer could wait another week. 112 consecutive Friday mornings. 2 years and 8 weeks. The transfer was always $89. I know that sounds like a strange number. It isn't. It was the exact amount I had left after rent, utilities, groceries, my student loan minimum, and a $23 buffer I kept in checking for the unexpected. $89 was not a sacrifice. It was a statement of intent. Every week, regardless of what the week had cost me, I found $89 and I moved it. By the time my sister Adi's wedding arrived, the account held $9,968. I had the cashier's check cut for $9,500. The round number felt wrong, too transactional, too clean. I wanted it to be specific. I wanted her to look at that number and understand that it had a texture to it. That it had 112 Friday mornings built into it. That it had the winter I didn't replace my car battery until April because I didn't want to pull from the account. That it had the summer I skipped my college roommate's bachelorette in Savannah because the flights cost $340 and that was almost 4 transfers and I had made a promise to myself. $9,500. That was the number. I put the cashier's check in an ivory envelope. I wrote Adi's name on the front in my best handwriting, the kind I only use for things that matter. Inside was a card. It said, "You are worth every Friday morning I ever spent on you." I sealed it on a Wednesday evening in my apartment in Durham, North Carolina, where I worked as a pediatric occupational therapist at Duke Children's Hospital. I put it in the inside pocket of my garment bag, next to the green wrap dress I was planning to wear. I did not know on that Wednesday evening what I was going to learn at the entrance of Belmere Hall in Charlotte, North Carolina 3 days later. I need to tell you about my sister before I tell you about the wedding. Adiz is 4 years older than me. She is, and I want to be precise about this, not a cruel person. She is a person who has spent her entire life being the center of a gravitational field that our parents created and maintained and called love. She did not build the field. She was born into it. But she has also never, in 29 years of my watching her, done a single thing to question it. That is its own kind of choice. My parents, Chukwemeka and Ngozi Achebe, came to the United States from Enugu State in Nigeria in 1991. They settled in Greensboro, North Carolina, where my father took a position as a civil engineer with the city and my mother worked as a registered nurse at Cone Health. They were, by any reasonable measure, extraordinary people. They worked with a ferocity that I did not understand as a child and that I now understand completely. They built a life from the specific, deliberate kind of nothing that immigrants build from. No family nearby, no institutional memory, no safety net with their name on it. They also brought with them certain ideas about how a family should be ordered. The oldest daughter, especially an oldest daughter who was, from the first day of kindergarten, clearly exceptional, occupied a specific position in that order. Adiz was exceptional. This was not our parents' delusion. She was legitimately, demonstrably exceptional, valedictorian at Grimsley High School, summa cum laude at Wake Forest, and by the time of her wedding, a licensed physician completing her fellowship in nephrology at Atrium Health in Charlotte. He was also in our household the son. I don't say this with bitterness, or at least not with simple bitterness. I say it the way you say a true thing that has cost you something. Our household had a son and everyone else was in some orbital relationship to it. My father called Adiz his Eni, his mother, affectionately because she had been born serious and responsible and seemed to have arrived already knowing what she wanted. My mother spoke of her at every family gathering with a specific quality of pride that was almost physical. You could see it in the way she stood straighter when someone asked about Adiz's training. I was not the son. I was, depending on the moment, various things. The flexible one, the easygoing one, the one who would understand, the one they didn't need to worry about because she had always figured it out. These are the kinds of descriptions that sound like compliments and function as dismissals. By the time I was in high school, I had learned to receive them as the latter and say thank you anyway. The specific shape of my erasure was not dramatic. It never announced itself. It accumulated. When Adiz graduated from medical school, the ceremony was at Waite Chapel on the Wake Forest campus, 340 attendees, a reception afterward at the Forsyth Country Club. My parents flew in my grandmother from Nigeria. They hired a photographer. They printed programs with Adiz's name on them and a photograph of her at 16, when she had won a regional science competition. My mother wore a full traditional Igbo wrapper and gele. It was a cake. When I graduated from North Carolina A&T with my degree in occupational therapy, my ceremony was on a Tuesday in May, outdoors, folding chairs. My parents attended. They sat in the third row. They applauded when my name was called. Afterward, we went to a Chili's on Battleground Avenue because my father had a meeting the following morning and they needed to leave by 7. I don't tell you this to measure the injustice in appetizers and programs. I tell you because I want you to understand the thing I had internalized by the time I was 22, which is this. In my family, love was real, but visibility was allocated. And the allocation had been decided before I arrived. The question I spent my 20s slowly answering was, what do you do with that? My answer eventually was, you build something anyway. You transfer $89 every Friday. You become a pediatric occupational therapist who helps children with sensory processing disorders learn to navigate a world that was not designed for them, which is work you are very good at, partly because you understand from the inside what it feels like to need more from a room than the room is giving you. You build something anyway. And you try, against the accumulated evidence, to keep loving the people who can't quite see you. The wedding invitation arrived in March. Cream envelope, my name handwritten on the front. Adiz's return address in the upper left corner. I opened it at my kitchen counter on a Tuesday evening after a long shift. Inside was a card in ivory and gold that read, Dr. Adiz Achebi and Mr. Kofi Mensah request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration. And below the ceremony details in smaller print, a note. Simone, so glad you can make it. We'll have everything coordinated by the venue. See you there. No role listed. No bridesmaid request. No rehearsal dinner information. I turned the card over looking for something I might have missed. There was nothing on the back. I set the card on my kitchen counter and stood there for a moment. Then I went to my desk and I checked the account balance. $9,634 at that point. 10 weeks left to the wedding. 10 more Fridays. I transferred $89 that Thursday instead of Friday because I wanted to. I need to tell you about my Aunt Ifeoma before I tell you about the badge. Aunt Ifeoma is my father's younger sister. She is 54 years old and lives in Decatur, Georgia, where she works as a high school art teacher at Druid Hills High School and keeps a garden that her neighbors have photographed for the neighborhood newsletter 3 years running. She was also, for most of my childhood, something of a family ghost. She had committed the specific offense of marrying a man my grandparents did not approve of, a Yoruba man, which was a problem my grandparents had eventually softened on, and then more permanently of moving to Georgia rather than returning to Nigeria or at least staying in the same city as the family. She was considered, in the vocabulary my grandmother used, the flexible one. Flexible meaning expendable. Flexible meaning the one we can ask to move without feeling we've lost anything structural. I had always felt a specific kinship with Aunt Ifeoma that I hadn't fully named until I was in my mid-20s. She had been invited to the wedding. She drove up from Decatur the morning of. She called me when she was an hour out. Simi, she said. She was the only person who called me that. Are you already at the venue? I'm on my way, I said. How are you feeling? I considered the question. I'm not sure yet, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, whatever happens, I'll be there. I didn't know at that point exactly what she meant. I thought she meant, I'll be at the wedding and I support you, and isn't it nice that we're both going? I understand now that she meant something more specific. That she had perhaps her own history with events where someone in our family had handed her a designation she hadn't asked for. That she knew what it felt like to arrive somewhere as family and be processed as something adjacent to it. She was already there when I pulled into the parking lot of Belmere Hall at 12:40 p.m. Belmere Hall sat in the Ballantine neighborhood of Charlotte, North Carolina. A white stucco building with arched windows and a circular drive, and at the entrance, 2 large urns of white hydrangeas that were the most beautiful flowers I had ever seen outside of a photograph. There were 47 guests. I learned that number later. At the entrance in the moment all I knew was that there were people I recognized. Cousins, family, friends, a few faces from Adi's medical training. Moving through the doors in the kind of dressed-up cluster that means something formal and important is about to begin. At the entrance table, a young woman with a seating chart clipboard looked up when I approached and gave me a professional smile. Name: Simone Achebe. She scanned the list. Found my name. Reached to a small tray beside the clipboard. She handed me a gray badge on a lanyard. It was laminated. It read in clean black print, "Support Tier, Limited Access." I looked at it. She was already turning to the next guest. I looked at the badge. I looked at the doors. I looked at the badge again. I put the lanyard around my neck. My mother appeared at my right elbow. She was wearing a gold and burgundy wrapper and a ghillie that she had spent 2 hours arranging that morning. I knew this because she had texted me a photograph at 9:47 a.m. with the caption, "Doesn't your mother look beautiful today?" She did look beautiful. She looked radiant. She put her hand on my arm in the way she does when she is communicating something that is not technically a command but functions as one. "It's just the tiering system," she said. "The venue has different access levels. You'll be in the overflow section for the ceremony and the reception is open seating, but is there a plate for me at the reception?" Her hand tightened slightly on my arm. "The dinner is for the main party. There are appetizers." "Mom, you never participated in the planning anyway, Simone." She said it gently. He believed it. "You weren't part of the process. This is just how the tiers work." She moved away into the crowd. I stood at the entrance of Belmere Hall in Charlotte, North Carolina, in my emerald wrap dress, with a gray support tier badge around my neck and a garment bag in the car that had an ivory envelope in the inside pocket with a cashier's check for $9,500 and a card that said, "You are worth every Friday morning I ever spent on you." Aunt Ifioma appeared beside me. She looked at the badge. She looked at my face. She said nothing. She put her hand briefly on my back between my shoulder blades just for a moment, and then she stood beside me quietly in the way that means I see this and I am not leaving. The ceremony was in the main hall. Adiz walked in on my father's arm to a recorded instrumental version of a song I recognized as one she had loved since college. She was wearing a white gown with gold beading at the collar that caught the light when she moved. She was crying before she reached the altar, which is the thing about Adiz that has always complicated my ability to simply be angry at her. She feels things fully. She just doesn't always extend that capacity to me. Kofi Mensah was a tall man with a deliberate way of moving. An architect at US 3P Associates in Charlotte, I had learned from the program, who looked at my sister like she was the resolution of a very long question. I believed he loved her. I still believe that. I sat in the overflow section, 4 rows behind the last family row, in a cluster of white folding chairs along the left wall. And Ifioma sat beside me. During the exchange of vows, I looked at my sister's face and thought about the card in the garment bag in my car. "You are worth every Friday morning I ever spent on you." And then I thought she knew. That was the thought I had been walking around for 3 months since the invitation arrived with its one-line note and no roll and no rehearsal dinner information. Adiz had known what the badge meant. She had known what the tiers meant. She had either asked for it or permitted it, and the difference between those two things was smaller than I had once believed. I held my clutch in my lap through the entire ceremony. Aunt Ifioma sat beside me and looked straight ahead. The reception opened in the adjoining salon, a smaller room than the main hall, with round tables draped in ivory linen and centerpieces of white roses and eucalyptus and gold pillar candles. 42 place settings. White plates, gold-rimmed. I counted the settings from the doorway. The gift table was near the entrance to the salon. A long table in ivory linen, stacked with wrapped gifts and envelopes. I could see it from where I stood. I could also see Kofi's mother. Her name was Dr. Abina Mensah. I had learned this from the program, which listed her as Dr. Abina Mensah, retired professor of economics, University of Ghana, Legon, currently visiting faculty at Davidson College. She was a compact woman in her late 60s wearing a deep navy Kent-trimmed dress and reading glasses that she kept taking on and off as she consulted the program. She had the manner of someone who had spent a career being the most prepared person in the room and had grown comfortable with it. She had been seated at the main family table. She was the kind of person my mother most wanted to impress. I moved to the edge of the salon and stood near the wall. A server passed with a tray of appetizers, Small cucumber rounds with cream cheese and smoked salmon. He offered me one. I took it. I was not going to the dinner table. There was no setting with my name on it. This was the extent of my plate. I stood there for 20 minutes. I watched my parents move through the room with the confidence of people performing their best version of themselves. I watched my father embrace Kofi's uncle with the warmth of a man who has never questioned his own place in a room. I watched my mother laugh at something Dr. Abina Mensah said, her laugh slightly louder than necessary, her posture slightly straighter. And Ifeoma found me near the wall. She stood beside me. We didn't speak for a while. Then she said very quietly, I was the flexible one in our house too. I looked at her. In your grandfather's house, she said. Your father was the son. I was the flexible one. That's the word they used. Flexible. Meaning, we can bend her. Meaning, she will hold the shape we need. She was looking at the room, not at me. I drove 4 hours today, she said. Because you are not flexible. And I wanted to be in the room to see you remember that. I looked at the gift table. I looked at the garment bag I had retrieved from my car when the ceremony ended and set near the entrance. The ivory envelope visible in the inside pocket where I had tucked it so I would not forget. I thought about 112 Fridays. I walked to the garment bag. I took out the envelope. I walked to the gift table. I want to tell you this slowly. I picked up the envelope from the garment bag. I walked the 12 feet to the gift table. I set the envelope down on the table, not in the pile with the other gifts but flat in front of everything clearly visible. I smoothed it once with my hand. Then I picked it up again. That was the action. Setting it down. Then picking it back up. The pause between the two was maybe 4 seconds, and in those 4 seconds I was not deciding anything. I had decided everything already on 112 Friday mornings. I was simply completing the decision. I held the envelope in both hands. I turned around. Adiz was standing 8 feet away. She had come from the head table. I don't know when she moved, I hadn't seen her. And she was standing in her gold-beaded white gown with her bouquet still loosely in her hand and an expression I had never seen on her face in 29 years of watching it. She looked frightened. Not of me. Of the thing she recognized in what I was doing. Of the specific shape of what it meant that I was standing at the gift table with the envelope in my hands and not in the pile. Simone, she started. This isn't yours, I said. 4 words. I had not chosen them in advance. They were simply the truest sentence available. I said it without anger. Without performance. Without heat of any kind. I held the envelope in both hands and I looked at my sister in her wedding dress and I said, this isn't yours. And then I turned to leave. That was when Dr. Abina Mensah stood up. She had been at the main family table 6 feet from the gift table. I had not registered that she was watching. But she had been watching the way a professor watches a room. Comprehensively, quietly, with the patience of someone who waits for the thing that reveals the pattern. She stood. She was not tall. But she stood the way people stand when they have earned the right to take up space in a room and have stopped apologizing for it. She looked at my mother, who had appeared from somewhere to my left and was now standing with her hands clasped and her expression arranged in the particular configuration she used when managing a situation in front of important witnesses. Dr. Mensah's voice was measured. It carried without effort. Patricia. My mother looked at her. The expression flickered almost imperceptibly into something younger, into the expression of someone who is being seen by a person they most wanted to impress. That young woman, Dr. Mensah said, is the bride's sister. Is she not? She is, my mother said. But the seating, the tiers were a venue requirement. Is she at the dinner table? Silence. Patricia. My mother said quietly, the dinner is for the main party. Dr. Mensah looked at my mother for a moment with an expression I could not fully read. It was not anger, it was something more like the conclusion of a long calculation. Then she looked at me. Simone, she said. Would you sit at my table? The room, the 47 people in that room or at least the 20 within earshot, went very still. I looked at Dr. Abina Mensah. I looked at my mother, whose face had done something that I had never seen it do in the 47 years she had been assembling it for other people. I looked at Adiz, who was still standing 8 feet from me with her bouquet and her frightened expression and the gold beading catching the candlelight. I said, thank you, Dr. Mensah. I'm going to go. For words the ones I had said. For more words the ones I said now. I walked to where Aunt Ifeoma was standing near the wall. He had watched all of it. Her eyes were bright. She gave me one small nod. I picked up my garment bag from the entrance. The ivory envelope was in my hand. I walked out. The parking lot of Belmere Hall was very quiet. October in Charlotte. The air had the specific quality of early autumn evenings there, still warm but with something underneath it that knows the season is turning. I sat in my car for a while. I looked at the ivory envelope in my lap. Adi's name in my best handwriting. The cashier's check for $9,500 inside. The card. I put the envelope in my glove compartment. Aunt Ifioma knocked on my passenger window 2 minutes later. I unlocked the door. She got in. We sat there for a little while without speaking. Then she said, "Your grandfather had a saying. He used it about the flexible branch. He said it bends but never breaks. He meant it as a compliment. He was wrong about what it meant." I looked at the steering wheel. "A branch that only bends," she said, "eventually forgets what straight looks like." I started the car. On Monday morning I called the bank and voided the cashier's check. I opened a new account that afternoon. The first transfer into it was $9,500. The whole amount at once, the only time I have ever made a transfer that large. It did not feel like spending. It felt like taking something back. I named the account as, for me. That was 2 months ago. The wedding photographs were posted 3 weeks after the ceremony. 41 photographs across 2 platforms. In 39 of them I do not appear. In 2 of them I appear at the edge of the frame in the background, out of focus, facing away. The algorithm probably doesn't know I'm there. I know I'm there. I was there. I sent one message. To Adi's only, not to my parents. Said, "I had something for you. I came to give it to you. You know what happened and so do I, and I don't think either of us needs to pretend otherwise. When you're ready to talk about it honestly, not to explain it, just to be honest about it, I'm here." I never wasn't. She replied 8 days later. Her reply was 6 sentences. The last one was, "I told Mom it wasn't right. He said you'd understand. I should have called you." I read it twice. I did not reply immediately. I am still thinking about what I want to say. I am still at Duke Children's Hospital on Irwin Road in Durham. My patients are children between 2 and 12 years old who are learning how to exist comfortably in their bodies and in the world. A lot of my work is about helping them recognize when an environment is asking them to be smaller than they are, and teaching them what to do about that. I am aware of the irony. I am working on it. The account I named S, for me, has $9,677 in it now, because I have transferred $89 every Friday since the wedding, because that is simply what I do on Fridays, and I am not going to stop doing it because of a gray badge and a crackers plate. I am taking a trip in the spring. There is a pediatric OT conference in Lisbon, Portugal in April, and the registration is open, and I have always wanted to go to Lisbon, and I am going. I bought a new winter coat last week. Caramel colored. Long cashmere blend. It has pockets deep enough to hold an envelope. I am not the flexible one. I never was. If you've ever built something for someone who couldn't see what it cost you, drop a 7 in the comments. Just a 7. I want to know how many of us are in this room. And if this story stays with you past today, genuinely, consider subscribing. Only if it truly means something.